Welcome to the Mid-Ohio Valley Public Forum Video Podcast. I'm Jennifer Bryant.
And I'm Kim Van Ryn.
And we're your co-hosts. The pandemic has changed civic life quite a bit in our country.
And this is an election year. One of the changes is that candidates have not been able to campaign the way they normally would. So we hope these podcasts will help viewers become better acquainted with the candidates and make a more informed decision on who to vote for.
If you're a candidate and you're interested in being interviewed, you can reach out to us through our Facebook page. That's the MOV Public Forum, or you can reach out to us through email at movpublicforum@gmail.com. But you should do it quickly because the election is less than 30 days away and people are already voting.
Today we'll be interviewing Bob Beach. Bob is a candidate for West Virginia Commissioner of Agriculture. Welcome, Bob. We're so glad you could join us this morning.
Good morning. Good morning, and thank you.
Well, sir, if you would just take a minute and give us a very short introduction on who Bob Beach is and why you've decided to run for Agricultural Commissioner.
Well, thank you. Well, let's start off with the fact that I am a West Virginia State Senator. I represent Monongalia and Marion counties here in West Virginia, and I have been in the legislature for the past 20 years as a member of the Committee of Agriculture. During my time in the House, I also served as chairman. So quite an extensive history there in regards to legislation we've passed over the last few years. Also, you know, let's back up a little bit. Let's go back to childhood. That's where my farming experience starts, is on the farm. I was raised on a large cattle farm here in Monongalia County, north of Morgantown, a little place called Fort Martin. And it was a large cattle farm. We were FFA and 4-H kids all along the way. My dad taught ag sciences, so he taught that for 35 years. So the importance of agriculture was instilled in us at a very young age. And we maintained a position that we're always close to agriculture. My family still are involved in agriculture very closely. My younger brother actually manages the family farm, and most of my siblings live on the family farm. So the middle of my life was spent in grocery stores. I forego the route of education, continued education in college, until much later in life. I went into grocery stores, became a meat department manager, and became a buyer, commodities buyer as well, and a supervisor for multiple stores in southwestern Pennsylvania. Obviously, that's the experience I really bring to the table, is my ag knowledge, but my management experience and the fact that food safety is key to this office. It's job number one: food safety, wholesome foods for the state of West Virginia in regards to what's going into the public schools, what's going into our restaurants, and what's eventually ending up on your table at home. So yeah, there's 54 years of experience I'm bringing to the table, and I think that's the emphasis of today's program. I think you'll see that.
Well, Bob, West Virginia, and I'm sure you know this since this is your background too, is mainly small family farms. 98% of the farms in West Virginia are classified as small, and 97% of them are family-owned operations. So this is completely opposite to what happens in most of the rest of the country in regards to agriculture. I used to live in the Central Valley of California when I was in the military, and there are some huge operations out there that, are run by corporations. And so that's what happens in agriculture these days. It's typically mega corporate farms. So if you're elected Commissioner of Agriculture, what is your plan to help those struggling small family farms in West Virginia?
Well, I'm one of those who believe that the small family farm is our saving grace, so to speak. It was those larger operations in the Midwest and in California, as a matter of fact, who ended up struggling and taking the bigger loss because of what was happening. Obviously, in California and Arizona, Florida, they couldn't get their product to market, and they were actually destroying crops in the fields. Obviously, that vertical approach to farming in the Midwest that we're all familiar with, where the animals are raised there, fed there, slaughtered there, packaged there, and then marketed out across the United States, that collapsed under the COVID situation. Those markets obviously couldn't operate because most of those people were affected by the COVID outbreak. So that's where I think the small farmers and West Virginia as a whole, that's where we succeeded, is the fact that, yeah, we struggled in some areas. We knew that the markets were slowing down. We couldn't send the beef out west to be slaughtered and all that. But I think those markets also benefited us in the fact that we could still feed our families here locally, because everybody seemed to know, if you just make a simple query, where can I buy some beef? Where can I buy a side of beef? Where can I buy a quarter of a beef? So it's just a simple question. Same way with produce. But going back to the importance of the question, I believe here in West Virginia, yes, we do have a lot of small farms, but that is to our benefit. And if you start looking at it as a puzzle, and all those small pieces make up the puzzle, and you pull them together, we have a larger image of what we can do with agriculture here in the state of West Virginia. We have opportunities to grow it on that platform. So if we're bringing all these little farms together in a cluster, and they're producing one item that we know that retail markets across the East Coast are wanting in their grocery stores at a particular time, then we can IQF, which was individually quick freeze these products and get them into the warehouses, which in turn gets it out to the grocery stores. We can feed our folks first and foremost, but then we can also reach that larger market, which is untapped for West Virginia farmers right now. We could be the breadbasket of the East Coast, but we have to take that mindset. Let's collectively work together, produce a product that folks want, and then move forward.
Well, much like the population of West Virginia, which has been in decline for decades, the number of farms is declining as well. At the peak back in the 1930s, we reached a high of 97,000 farms, but today we're down to somewhere around 20,000, and we're shedding farm operations weekly. Our farmers retire and the next generation don't want to continue with the family farm operation for many reasons. Do you have a plan to turn this around? I know that your family has continued with the family farm, but it doesn't seem like that's the trend.
Well, I think first we have to identify why we're losing farms. Early on, back in the 70s and 80s, and probably even into the 60s, we could identify it as being just an age group. But I think more importantly, we have to understand what was going on in the state of West Virginia. Coal was at its peak. Farms were being bought up for strip mines, underground mines, mountaintop removal. And then on the other side of that, we have forestry, who were coming in and buying 1,000-acre tracts and taking it out of production, sitting on it for 40 years before it was ready to be timbered again. So there's a lot of things we have to explore. Unfortunately, in all those scenarios, it never came back to farmland. So if we take that out of consideration and just focus on what we know we can save here in the state of West Virginia, I think we have a lot of opportunities. We have lost a lot of farms here. What's the number right here? 160,000 acres in the last 4 years of farmland. Well, we have to stay on top of that. We have to know. We have to be taking surveys on a regular basis and working with these farmers, because it could be, yep, it's a generational thing that mom and dad want to get out, the kids don't want to go into it. But I think we have to really have a conversation. Well, why does the kids not want to stay with the farming operation? And it usually comes down to the dollar. They take a full-time job, just really don't have time to do a half part-time job on the farm. Mom and dad were successful at it because mom and dad had been doing it for quite a long time, maybe 40, 50 years. They understood it. Whereas the child coming into the process, there's an education that needs to go along with this. What has to happen for me to be successful? What needs to happen for me to do this as a full-time or even a fantastic supplemental income? We have a lot of operations here in the state of West Virginia. If you grow about 15 to 30 trees, you can supplement of apple trees. You can supplement your income up to $30,000. That's pretty good income in the state of West Virginia. If the other spouse in the family has the opportunity to bring the health insurance to the table and someone stay home to manage the trees and things like that, that's a pretty good income for the state of West Virginia. And there's many opportunities just like that. But the conversations we hear across the state, well, we want to make this full time. And I think that's what the Department of Agriculture should be focused on. We need to get to the point where we're regionalizing processing facilities so these farmers can expand, and knowing for a fact, I have somewhere to go with my product to have it processed and then get it into the overall market. They just can't grow something and just assume we're going to have a market for it or there's going to be a place for it to be processed. That's one of the problems we have with the hemp industry right now. Across the state of West Virginia, there's a lot of applications, but on the other end of it, which is what we should be looking at, is the output. Those folks don't have a lot of resources for processing. There's only 4 processing facilities in the state of West Virginia. That's not much for the acreage we're starting to see that's going into hemp production. Same thing applies to our berries and our fruits, all the vegetables, the beef, the hogs. There has to be an infrastructure there, and we need to identify that and get that into play to be successful.
Mm-hmm. So give us your thoughts on sustainable farming. Do you know farmers in West Virginia who are doing this successfully? And is this something you're hoping to encourage and see an increase in?
Yeah, I do. I believe that may in fact be some of the success stories you're going to hear in the next 5 to 6 years, sustainable practices there. Just recently, I had an opportunity to visit with a gentleman in Welch in McDowell County. He has an operation that sits on top of a mountain ridge of just 2 acres. And that's what he's doing there. But what he's taking it one step further. He uses it more or less as an experimental plot. And let's use collard greens for an example. He grows a wonderful collard green product. He really does. So when I was there and I tasted it, I actually brought some home. Fantastic. But he's taking that next year down to the valley where he has 6 acres. And he's going to grow this in a mass project there. But what's nice about this gentleman is the fact that he already has it sold before he plants it. And that's what we have to be teaching our farmers. Let's find an outlet for it before you get into it. Just growing is not going to mean it's going to sell. You have to have an outlet. And he's very good at that. And we have an situation over in the Eastern Panhandle. Young couple, they have 6 acres. They only farm 1 acre of it. Their home is also on that 6 acres with a large farm pond. That's their income for the year. They have invested and they focus on that 1 acre to provide food for themselves and for the farmers market. I believe they're in 4 farmers markets in the Eastern Panhandle. They work very hard at it. It's not something that comes easy, but they had a plan going in. And that's one of the things we have to teach our young farmers going in. Establish that plan. Have it laid out from beginning to end, what's going to occur, and identify the potholes, so to speak, and what you have to do to overcome those. But yeah, there's an opportunity. The candidate who was on the Republican side of the ballot in the primary from Wayne County, I believe, he's a sustainable farmer in West Virginia. And he does, well, he has several children there on the farm with him, and he has a wonderful practice. And there's examples like that all over the state of West Virginia. Folks just don't realize they're out there. But again, I want to advocate for agriculture in the state of West Virginia. Those are the stories I want to share. I don't want to talk about the Department of Agriculture. I want to share the farming stories that are out there. Let people know that there's opportunities in agriculture in the state of West Virginia. That's the easiest way to sell agriculture and economic development is by those stories, because they are success stories.
Well, one new trend in agriculture is something being called urban farming. And Kim and I are both in the city proper of Parkersburg. So it's not urban on a national scale, but it's urban for West Virginia.
Yes, that's right.
People are using vacant land in urban areas and farming it, and they're using urban residential lots to grow crops rather than grass lawns or ornamental flowers. The U.S. Department of Agriculture this spring announced that they will be giving away $3 million in grants for the development of urban agriculture. We have lots of vacant lots here in our city that are producing very little income in property tax and actually costing the city money because they have to mow the lots to maintain the appearance of neighborhoods. I'm sure there are other locations in West Virginia that have the same issue. What are your plans for encouraging urban agriculture in West Virginia?
Well, number one, you mentioned the $3 million there. I think the state of West Virginia, the Department of Agriculture, should match dollar for dollar whatever the feds bring to the table. I think we need to establish that plan right up front because there is an opportunity for urban development in the form of agriculture here in the state of West Virginia. I'm familiar with Parkersburg very well. My mother-in-law still lives there. My wife is from Parkersburg. She's a Big Red, by the way. And yeah, so we're there every weekend checking up on her, or she's here with the boys with us. But no, there's great opportunity for urban development in agriculture within our city limits. And I would kind of classify myself in that category. I operate a high tunnel just outside the back porch here. And that yields a lot of food for the family, feeds my family. And if I wanted to take it to farmer's market, I guess I could, but we usually end up giving it away. But the high tunnel in that application would be great. For one, it gives you food security there. That hopefully you have someone that's not going to try and get into your high tunnel. You would probably want to put a fence around the whole unit if you could. But there's an opportunity also for the expansion of agritourism through urban development like that. You pick a day of the week and invite folks in to harvest their own food. If you're growing a high tunnel full of strawberries, if that's the case, or even outside the high tunnel, pick your own. That's agritourism. Now would be a great time to take an acre plot that's sitting in downtown Parkersburg or whatever, to have had pumpkins. Just fill that thing up with pumpkins and then invite kids in school, local schools, to just shop for their own little pumpkin there. You don't get a lot of vandalism with pumpkins. That's why I use that example. Usually people stay away from pumpkins. They're heavy to lug around or whatever. But yeah, there's little projects like that to go on around the state of West Virginia all the time. And I'm a big fan of urban development in agriculture, because it brings property value to everybody else that's around that piece of property. And if you're trying to sell your house, it's nice to point across the street and say, hey, that's a garden over there. It's just not a vacant lot. There's someone actually participating. There's someone on that lot that wants to see this community succeed. So yeah, there's a lot of benefits to urban agriculture.
Well, there are so many issues in agriculture that we haven't even touched on. You mentioned food safety, you mentioned high tunnels. There are all kinds of things we haven't been able to touch on. So here's your chance. What do you think are the 3 biggest issues facing agriculture in West Virginia?
Well, number one is education here in the state of West Virginia. We actually have a plan in place, and we'll talk about that here in a moment, that tries to get greenhouses into our school systems on a regular basis. And the second, obviously, is developing programs that are a seamless program in education that allows us to start at a very young age, work through high school. Obviously, we have our FFA and VOAG programs across the state of West Virginia. But then we want those guys who are working in the field to get some college credit, transferable college credit for the work that they've done. And it may be working a greenhouse, working in a nursery. So we want to get some college credit there, because I think that's one of the gateways to furthering our education here in the state of West Virginia for our residents, is get them a little bit of college credit. See if those 3 credits were easier to achieve than what you thought, and get them into the classroom, get a 2-year experience or a 4-year experience. Because here in the state of West Virginia, we have some wonderful ag programs. We need to get that pipeline into the school system and then into 2- and 4-year programs. Infrastructure here in the state of West Virginia is key if we are ever going to really grow the state of West Virginia. And I say infrastructure, we talked about local regional processing facilities. That's key. But for them to be successful, we also have to have broadband in place. We also have to have fresh water, and we also have to have access to sanitation. And I think the role that the Department of Agriculture plays is getting on board with the Department of Commerce, the governor's office, and the legislature, working together to establish plans to get all 3 of those into rural West Virginia. Places like Parkersburg, Morgantown, we have access to all those. But time and time again, as a state senator, I get phone calls from folks in southern West Virginia. Hey, we'd like to have sewage. We'd like to have fresh water. And that's a big issue. But more and more, especially with this COVID, it has identified the problem we have with the lack of broadband across the state of West Virginia. And we as the legislature, and the governor, going back many years, we have not done a very good job of really focusing on broadband access. We have stumbled around. We have thrown watermelons at the wall. We just do not have a good approach at how to handle it. So we need to get a focus on it, because it is very much a shotgun approach. And there's a little bit of, there's some areas of the state of West Virginia who are doing well, but we know for a fact that it's struggling. So yeah, that's one area. So we talked on education, we talked about infrastructure, communication. I can't say enough about communication. Right now in the state of West Virginia, as we've been touring around for the last 22 months, that has been the #1 complaint. Lack of communication with the Department of Agriculture and the agribusiness community. Most of the farmers feel that they're being left behind. And when you start to ask them, why do you feel that way? Well, no one's returning my phone call. Well, that's easy to fix. I'm an old grocery guy. Communication, customer service, how can I help you? #1 on my list. And that's what we're going in with. Communication will be key into developing that relationship with farmers across the state of West Virginia. Stop and listen. Ask the question, how can I help? And then just listen. Don't try to identify the problem before they're finished speaking. Don't try to define what they're going to need. Just stop and listen. I like phone calls. I like text messages, but by golly, whenever I ever get the chance and somebody wants to invite me out to the farm or whatever, and we sit around a coffee table or kitchen table with a cup of coffee, I just let them vent. And that's how I got into this. Just in matter of fact, it started in Greenbrier County with farmers. From there, Mason County and Kanawha County. I just let them vent for almost 2 hours, as a matter of fact, and then they asked me to jump in. So yeah, we're looking at education, communication, advocacy is another issue. We want to, as I mentioned earlier, we want to promote the farmers, not the Department of Agriculture.
Well, I'll say that this set of interviews with the different candidates in the primary for the agricultural commissioner have probably been the ones where I've learned the most. I don't feel like I was all that well informed prior to embarking on this project. So I thank you for joining us today. And now we'd like to give you time to tell us and the voters anything else you think we may have missed in our interview, things that we need to know, including how to get more information on your campaign, get a yard sign, get in touch, donate, etc.
Well, let me begin with one of the problems we still have, and I apologize as I meant this, is the fact that folks really don't realize the importance of the Department of Agriculture in their lives. When I go out to speak someplace, I always, just to break the ice, ask how many people eat a meal. Well, everyone eats a meal. Everyone wears clothing, and everyone sleeps in a bed for the most part. And there's blankets involved, and there's carpets on your floor. That's all agriculture, unless it's synthetic, obviously. That's all agriculture, so it's very important. Most people don't realize that 35,000 West Virginians didn't bother to vote for Commissioner of Agriculture in the primary. Because they don't understand agriculture and the importance involved with agriculture. I believe it's number 2 on the list of importance, right after the governor, because it's food safety, it's food quality, and then after that, it's economic development and what we can do for the state of West Virginia. It's jobs. But I'm bringing 54 years of experience to the table, and that's my focus. And it's in farming, it's in my retail background and management. Mine is a management background where I give direction. I encourage folks to get involved. I don't bark out orders. That's not how I work. And we will just move forward from there. But yeah, it's food safety. And then my legislative experience in being on agriculture. Most people don't realize once you go into the legislature, you're assigned committees. Well, you're asked what committees you want to be on before it begins. I've always asked for 2 committees. That's always been agriculture and education. And for 20 years, I've been on those committees. One of those things that folks also don't know about me personally is that I got into this process, legislative process, because my father also served in the House of Delegates before me, and he passed away while in office. So I finished out his term, and I got the bug. I really did. And I sat out 2 years and started running on my own and campaigning for office and have been successful. But fast forward to just, like I said, 22 months ago, is meetings with farmers there in Greenbrier County that encouraged me to jump into this race, and we've been at it ever since. But yeah, we bring 54 years of experience, and it's an opportunity to grow West Virginia, as I keep saying. It's economic opportunity, and a lot of those plans for greenhouses in our school systems, how we can save our dairy herds, how we can really rebuild hemp here in the state of West Virginia, because we are struggling with hemp. We're too focused on the front end of how many people are making applications. We're not focused on the other end, which, as you know, you should always be focused on outcome. If you're a teacher in the class, it's not how many kids are sitting in the seats, it's how well they're doing and what grades they're achieving. If you're a coal mine or if you're a coal operator, it's not how many guys are underground and how many pieces of equipment you have employed underground. It's tons of production on the other end. So we have to be focused on output and not necessarily what's happening on the front end of it as well. So yeah, there's a lot of things we want to bring to the table. A lot of it's mapped out on our social media, and a lot of it's also on our website, which is beach4wv.com, or just simply Google Bob Beach Agriculture or Commissioner, and you'll get to the Facebook page, and we're also on Twitter as well. But there's 2 Facebook pages. One's kind of a family page, and they kind of overlap, and the other one's strictly the farming issues. And yeah, please join us. We're open for discussion. Send us an email. The link is right there as well, or you can catch me on my personal one, which is bob-beach@comcast.net. And if you go to the legislative webpage, you'll see a cell phone number on. That's my personal cell phone. I think I'm the only legislator that does that. Feel free to call me, text message me, whatever you feel comfortable with. But ladies, I appreciate this. This has been very nice. I hope you did learn something from this.
Well, we appreciate you taking the time to talk with us, Bob. And yeah, I learned a little bit. I used to be a master gardener. My niece is given out, so I don't do that anymore. But
Master Gardeners program here in Montague County is a very popular program. It really is.
Yeah, yeah, it's a very valuable program, and
absolutely
could use even more support than it gets, I think.
You're right.
Anyway, thank you for joining us. We appreciate you taking the time, and good luck with your campaign.
Thank you.
And everyone, remember, wash your hands.